Poor widow pulled a bleeding stranger from tornado ruins at dawn. She discovered he was no ordinary man. The morning sun had barely begun to stretch its golden fingers across the sleepy town when Maria stepped out of her small, weathered house. The wooden boards creaked under her feet as she carefully walked across the yard, the earth still damp from the night's gentle rain. She paused for a moment, taking in the quiet beauty of dawn. The sky was painted in soft hues of pink and orange, the kind that made her heart feel both heavy and calm at the same time. Maria had lived in this little town all her life. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, and the air was always filled with the comforting hum of daily life. But for Maria, those sounds were distant now. The laughter of children playing in the streets, the early chatter at the marketplace, even the cheerful greetings from neighbors, these were things she remembered but rarely felt anymore. Her husband, Ahmed, had passed away 2 years ago, leaving her alone in the world with only memories and the small home they had shared. She knelt down to water the tiny garden she tended so carefully. The soil was rich, and the plants seemed to grow just a little stronger under her gentle care. Her hands, though calloused from years of work, moved with tenderness. Tomatoes, peppers, and a few stubborn sunflowers peeked through the soil. Maria always believed that nurturing life, even in small ways, kept hope alive. She whispered to her plants softly, as if they could understand her grief. "Grow strong," she said, "and make the world a little brighter." The wind began to pick up, brushing her hair across her face. It was unusual for this time of year, and Maria felt a shiver run down her spine. She looked up at the sky, and her heart skipped a beat. The soft morning colors had shifted to pale gray, and the clouds were gathering quickly, moving with a strange, urgent speed. A distant rumble rolled across the horizon, like the warning growl of some enormous creature. Maria frowned. Storms were not uncommon, but there was something different about this one. Shaking off the unease, she returned to her chores. She swept the porch, checked the roof for loose tiles, and made sure the windows were tightly closed. Her mind, ever practical, was already planning what she would do if the storm worsened. She didn't have family nearby, and the neighbors, though friendly, were older and frail. She knew she had to be careful. Maria had learned to face challenges alone, but the thought of facing a storm alone made her chest tighten. As she finished her preparations, the wind grew stronger. Branches bent under its force, and the air smelled of wet earth and something more, something metallic, like the distant scent of a storm tearing through metal roofs and trees. Maria's heart raced. She went back inside, locking the door and gathering a few essentials: a small first aid kit, a flashlight, bottled water, and a few blankets. She placed them in a basket, ready to carry if she needed to take shelter quickly. Then she paused. The house was silent except for the soft whistle of the wind. Maria closed her eyes and let herself remember Ahmed for a moment. He had been her strength, her laughter, and her partner in everything. The empty space beside her felt heavier now than ever. She clutched the basket a little tighter, drawing courage from memories of his warmth and their shared resilience. "I can do this," she whispered to herself. "I have to." Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, gentle at first, then faster, driven by the gusting wind. Maria stepped to the window and watched as the trees swayed violently, leaves tearing free and flying through the air. She could hear the distant sounds of destruction, branches snapping, shutters banging, the low roar of the wind growing louder by the second. Her heart pounded. She had survived hardships before, but storms like this, she realized, were unpredictable and dangerous. The lights flickered for a moment, then went out, leaving her house in the gray dim of early morning. Maria lit a small candle and set it on the kitchen table. Its flickering flame cast long shadows across the walls, and for a moment she felt a strange sense of comfort. The storm outside was frightening, yes, but the small warmth of the candle reminded her that she could face the darkness. Suddenly, a louder, more urgent rumble rolled across the sky. Maria's eyes widened as she realized the storm was not just a typical rainstorm. It was something more violent, more alive. She felt the air shift, like the world itself was holding its breath. She gripped the edge of the table as a particularly strong gust hit the house, rattling the windows and shaking the walls. For a moment, fear overwhelmed her, and she found herself trembling, not just from the cold, but from the sudden awareness of how fragile life could be. Maria's practical mind took over. She grabbed her basket, wrapped herself in a thick shawl, and moved to the cellar. The stairs creaked under her weight, and the earthy smell of the cellar filled her nose. She lit another candle and set it on the steps, making sure she could see as she descended. The cellar was small but sturdy, and Maria had stocked it with a few essentials in case of emergencies. She sat on the cold stone floor, clutching the basket to her chest, and listened. The storm was above her now, its roar deafening. She could hear debris being thrown against the walls, the wind howling like a living thing. Her thoughts raced, her neighbors, her small garden, the fragile town she loved so dearly. But amid the fear, Maria felt something else, a determination, a stubborn refusal to let the storm break her spirit. She remembered Ahmed's words, "Courage is not the absence of fear, Maria, but moving forward in spite of it." Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time seemed to lose meaning in the heart of the storm. The rain pounded like a relentless drum, and the wind shook the cellar walls as if testing her resolve. Maria held onto her basket, whispered prayers, and thought of the people she loved, of the simple life she hoped to protect. She imagined the dawn breaking again, painting the world in soft colors, and she clung to that hope like a lifeline. As the storm slowly began to lose its fury, Maria dared to stand. She pushed open the cellar door and stepped outside. The world had changed. The golden light of morning struggled to pierce the gray clouds, illuminating a landscape of broken trees, scattered debris, and roofs torn from their homes. The quiet after the storm was eerie, almost unnatural. Maria's heart ached at the sight, but she also felt a strange surge of hope. She had survived. She had made it through the night. And then she heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible sound beneath the chaos, a soft, pained groan coming from the direction of the destroyed homes. Maria froze. Her heart leapt. Someone was alive. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed her basket and ran toward the sound, the remnants of the storm crunching beneath her feet. Every instinct screamed at her to be careful, but she couldn't ignore the call for help. Someone needed her. The morning sun was now a pale disk in the sky, struggling to shine through the clouds. Maria's breath came in short, determined gasps as she moved quickly, weaving through splintered wood and fallen branches. Each step brought her closer to the sound, closer to whoever was out there struggling to survive. She didn't know who it was, but she knew she had to reach them. In that moment, all her fear, all her grief, melted into purpose. She was ready to face whatever lay ahead. And so, at dawn, in the quiet aftermath of a terrifying storm, Maria prepared herself for an act that would change her life forever. A simple, human act of courage that would soon reveal something extraordinary about the stranger she was about to save. The storm had passed, but the world Maria stepped into was almost unrecognizable. Trees lay snapped in half like twigs, roofs were torn from homes, and pieces of fences and broken furniture were scattered across the muddy streets. The air smelled of wet earth, splintered wood, and something metallic that made her stomach twist. Every step she took made her heart pound, not from fear of the storm anymore, but from the heavy weight of seeing how much had been destroyed. Maria clutched her basket tightly as she moved slowly through the wreckage. Her eyes scanned every corner, every shadow, hoping she might find someone else alive. The town was eerily silent except for the occasional creak of a leaning wall or the drip of water from a broken roof. Birds that usually filled the morning with song were nowhere to be seen. The once familiar streets now seemed like a strange, broken maze. Maria felt a shiver run down her spine, not from cold, but from the realization of how fragile life could be. Then through the ruined homes and scattered debris she heard it, a soft groan, almost drowned by the occasional creak of falling branches. Her heart jumped. Someone was alive. Without hesitation, she moved toward the sound, stepping over splintered wood and fallen signs. Every step was careful, measured, but her determination was stronger than her fear. She had to find whoever was calling for help. The groan came again, slightly stronger this time. Maria's eyes scanned the ruins until she spotted a figure partially hidden beneath what had once been the corner of a small shop. The man's clothes were torn, his face streaked with dirt and blood, and his body was pinned awkwardly under a heavy wooden beam. Maria's breath caught in her throat. Despite the horror of the scene, something inside her shifted. She couldn't just leave him there. Summoning every ounce of strength, she stepped closer. The beam was heavy, almost too heavy for one person, but Maria's resolve was unwavering. She pushed and lifted with all her might, her fingers gripping splintered wood as she tried to free him. The man groaned weakly, his voice rough and strained. "Help, please," he whispered, barely audible over the sounds of the ruined town. Maria felt a wave of determination wash over her. "I'm here," she said firmly. "I'm not going to leave you." Her voice was steady, even as her hands shook from the effort. Slowly, painstakingly, she managed to lift the beam just enough to pull him free. He slumped into her arms, heavier than she expected, and she struggled to keep him upright. His breathing was shallow, ragged, and each movement caused him pain. But he was alive. That was what mattered most. She carried him toward her home, every step a careful negotiation through the ruined streets. Pieces of wood and debris scratched her arms and legs, but she ignored them. The man in her arms moaned occasionally, and she pressed a hand to his forehead, feeling it was burning with fever. She tore a piece of cloth from her shawl and gently pressed it against a deep cut on his arm, trying to stop the bleeding. Maria had learned enough first aid from living alone and helping neighbors in small accidents over the years, but this was different. This was life or death. When she finally reached her house, she set him down gently on the floor and grabbed blankets to keep him warm. He was still unconscious, but Maria could see the shallow rise and fall of his chest. She cleaned the dirt from his face with water from a jug, careful not to disturb the cuts. As she worked, she noticed his hands, strong, large, and yet delicate in their own way. Something about him seemed unusual, almost as if he carried a quiet strength that was more than just physical. Maria's mind raced. Who was he? How had he survived the storm in that condition? He was clothed in simple, rough garments, but there was a dignity in his posture even in his unconscious state. He wasn't from the town, she realized. He was a stranger, and yet, by some twist of fate, he had survived in a place where many others might not have. The thought made her pulse quicken with both concern and curiosity. Hours passed as Maria worked to stabilize him. She pressed cold cloths to his forehead, checked his breathing, and whispered comforting words she wasn't sure he could hear. Slowly he began to stir, groaning softly as if waking from a deep, painful sleep. His eyes fluttered open, revealing a gaze that seemed to see more than just the room around him. Maria caught herself staring. There was something almost extraordinary in the depth of his eyes, a calmness that contrasted sharply with the chaos outside. "Can you hear me?" Maria asked gently, her voice a soothing anchor in the quiet room. He nodded weakly, his lips parting to speak. "Thank you," he murmured. The words were faint, but they carried a weight, as if he knew the danger he had just escaped. Maria smiled softly, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. He was alive, and that meant hope. As he regained some strength, Maria noticed something else. His injuries, though serious, did not seem to hinder him as much as they should. He sat up slowly, winced, but moved with a surprising steadiness. It was as if he carried an inner strength that went beyond ordinary human endurance. Maria couldn't help but wonder if there was something unusual about this stranger, something that explained not just his survival, but the calm way he bore his pain. The wind outside began to die down, leaving only the occasional rustle of leaves and distant dripping of rainwater. Maria prepared a simple meal: bread, water, and some of the tomatoes from her garden. The man ate slowly, his movements careful, deliberate, as if he were aware of every sensation in his body. Maria watched him, her curiosity growing. There was a quiet dignity about him, an almost otherworldly calm that seemed to make the shattered world outside feel a little less frightening. After he ate, he spoke more clearly, asking about the town, the storm, and the people who might still need help. Maria explained as best as she could, telling him which homes had been destroyed and which neighbors might be trapped or injured. He listened attentively, nodding, his expression serious but calm. Maria felt a growing sense of trust in him, as if this stranger, against all odds, was someone who could be relied upon. As the day passed, Maria tended to him, checking his wounds and helping him rest. She noticed that despite his injuries, he never complained, never showed fear, and carried an air of quiet authority that made her feel safe. He asked few questions, but when he did, they were thoughtful, precise, and full of insight. Maria found herself opening up, telling him about her life, her struggles, and even her fears. Somehow, speaking to him felt easier than speaking to anyone else. Evening approached, and the sky, now clear, revealed the soft glow of the setting sun. The town was still in ruins, but the chaos of the storm had passed. Maria stepped outside briefly, glancing back at the man resting on her floor. There was a strange, comforting aura about him, something that made her feel as though everything might be all right, despite the destruction. She shook her head in quiet amazement. How could a stranger, wounded and unknown, inspire such a feeling of safety? As darkness settled over the town, Maria lit a small lamp and placed it near the man's resting place. She sat beside him, exhausted from the day's efforts, but determined to stay awake and keep watch. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with an unspoken understanding. Though she had faced many hardships in her life, she sensed that this stranger's presence marked the beginning of something extraordinary. Hours later, she noticed him stir again. His eyes opened slowly, scanning the room, and then settling on her. There was a spark in his gaze, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond that had formed in the short time they had known each other. Maria smiled, feeling a mixture of relief, curiosity, and something she couldn't quite name. She had saved him, yes, but in that moment she realized that perhaps he had also saved her in a way she had not yet understood. And so, in the quiet aftermath of a storm that had torn the town apart, a poor widow and a bleeding stranger began an unexpected connection. One that would grow stronger in the days to come, revealing truths about courage, kindness, and the extraordinary nature of people who appear in our lives when we need them most. The morning after the storm, Maria awoke with a sense of quiet determination. The sun had begun to climb into the sky, scattering soft light across the shattered town. The air smelled of wet earth, leaves, and the faint tang of something burned from the storm's destruction. Her small house, though battered, had survived, and inside, the stranger she had pulled from the ruins stirred gently under a thick blanket. Maria sat beside him, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. His breathing was steady, yet there was a faint tension in his body, a reminder that his injuries were still serious. She checked the bandages she had applied the night before, ensuring they were secure. Each movement caused her to feel a mixture of worry and admiration. He had endured so much, and yet there was a calmness about him, a patience that seemed almost unnatural in someone who had been pinned under a heavy beam and left for dead. "Good morning," she said softly. He opened his eyes slowly and offered a faint smile, the kind that was small but reassuring. There was no panic, no fear, only a quiet acknowledgement that he was alive, that he was ready to face the day. Maria felt a strange warmth in her chest. Something about him radiated calm and strength. It was as if, despite everything, he carried a sense of purpose that could not be shaken. She handed him a cup of water and some bread. He accepted it carefully, his movements deliberate but surprisingly strong. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady but gentle. Maria noticed that his eyes seemed to hold a depth she could not quite explain. They were the kind of eyes that made you feel as though he could see more than the world in front of him. He could see the heart of things, the truth in people, the invisible threads that connected them. While he ate, Maria moved about the small house, gathering clean water and tidying what she could. The storm had left debris scattered everywhere, and there was still work to do. But even in the midst of chores, she found herself glancing at him repeatedly. There was something about the way he moved, even as he was still recovering, that spoke of quiet strength and purpose. It was not the strength of muscles alone. It was the strength of spirit, of someone who had faced danger and survived without losing hope. After breakfast, she encouraged him to rest. He lay back on the blankets but did not close his eyes immediately. Instead, he watched her, as if noticing every small detail of her home, the way she moved, the care she took in even the simplest tasks. Maria felt a strange mixture of shyness and comfort under his gaze. It was not intrusive. It was aware, almost thoughtful. She wondered who he was, where he had come from, and how he had survived the storm when so many others had not. "You are strong," she said quietly, almost to herself. He tilted his head slightly, as if acknowledging her words without surprise. "We all have strength we do not know we possess," he said softly. Maria felt a chill run down her spine. His words were simple, yet they carried a weight, a meaning that went beyond the ordinary. She could not explain it, but something inside her told her he was no ordinary man. As the morning passed, Maria tended to his injuries more carefully. She cleaned the deeper cuts with warm water, applied fresh cloth bandages, and pressed gently to stop any bleeding. Each time she touched him, she noticed how calm he remained, how his trust in her was complete despite the pain he endured. There was a quiet dignity in his behavior, a patience that was rare and inspiring. Maria felt herself drawn to this stranger, not just out of compassion but out of admiration. Once she had done all she could for his physical injuries, she began to talk with him. She asked about the storm, about his life, and how he had come to be in the town at that moment. He spoke little of himself, answering in careful, thoughtful sentences. But in his words, there was knowledge and understanding that seemed far beyond his apparent experience. He asked questions too, not about trivial matters but about people, about their struggles, their hopes, their fears. It was as if he had a deep interest in the human heart, in understanding the essence of those around him. Maria found herself telling him things she had never shared with anyone. She spoke of her husband, of her life alone, of the quiet days she spent caring for her garden and maintaining her home. She told him of the fear she had felt during the storm and how she had feared being truly alone. He listened attentively, nodding gently, offering no judgment, only understanding. His presence was comforting in a way she had not known she needed. By midday, Maria realized he was regaining more strength than she had expected. Though he still moved carefully, he could sit up for longer periods and even help her move small pieces of debris outside the house. His hands were gentle but strong, capable of lifting what seemed impossible for someone still recovering. He seemed almost tireless, as if the storm had not left a mark on his spirit, and this realization filled Maria with awe. While they worked together to clear debris from her small yard, she noticed other unusual things about him. When a weak branch threatened to fall nearby, he moved almost instinctively to prevent it, predicting its path and stopping it before it could cause harm. When she struggled with a heavy piece of wood, he appeared beside her, steadying it with ease. Maria's heart beat faster. There was no doubt in her mind now that he was extraordinary, not just in strength, but in awareness and instinct. As the afternoon wore on, they paused to rest under the shade of a surviving tree. Maria handed him water, and he drank slowly, his eyes scanning the horizon with a calm focus. "You are remarkable," she said quietly. He smiled faintly, but it was not pride that touched his features, it was serenity. "Remarkable," he repeated almost thoughtfully. "Perhaps we all are in ways we do not always see." Maria felt the truth in his words, though she could not fully understand their depth. The conversation drifted to practical matters. The town was damaged, many people needed help, and supplies were limited. Maria explained what she knew about neighbors who might be trapped or injured. He listened carefully, then suggested ways they could help safely, pointing out hazards she had not noticed. His insight was precise and clear, yet delivered with kindness, never command. Maria realized that his guidance came not from a desire to control, but from genuine care and understanding. As evening approached, the sky softened into a warm amber, and the air cooled. Maria and the stranger returned inside, tired but determined to prepare for the night. He helped her gather food and water, and even offered to assist in reinforcing the house against any remaining winds. Maria watched him closely, noting how calm he remained despite the chaos that surrounded them. Every action he took was measured, thoughtful, and full of a quiet authority that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt for years. Sitting by the window, Maria reflected on the day. She had faced many challenges in her life, but none like this. None that brought such fear, such responsibility, and yet such unexpected hope. The stranger had changed the day entirely, turning what could have been despair into determination. She realized she was not just caring for him. He was quietly teaching her strength, courage, and the power of calm presence in the face of adversity. Night fell slowly, and the first stars appeared in the sky. The town was still in ruins, but there was a quiet resilience among those who had survived. Maria felt a deep sense of connection with the stranger she had saved. Though he had shared little of his own past, his presence alone brought comfort and purpose. She could not explain it fully, but she knew that something extraordinary had entered her life, and that her world would never be quite the same again. As they prepared to sleep, Maria laid fresh blankets beside the stranger and sat for a moment, watching the candlelight flicker across the walls. "Thank you," she whispered, though it was unclear if she meant for surviving the storm, for trusting her, or for simply being there. The stranger smiled faintly, a simple gesture filled with quiet understanding. "You are welcome," he replied softly. "We are stronger together than apart." Maria closed her eyes that night with a mixture of exhaustion and wonder. She had faced the storm, rescued a stranger, and discovered that he was far from ordinary. His strength, calmness, and insight were unlike anything she had ever known. And as sleep claimed her, she felt a quiet certainty that the days ahead, though still uncertain and filled with rebuilding, would be touched by something remarkable. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the town, its soft golden light casting long shadows across the streets, still strewn with debris. Maria awoke early, her heart heavy but filled with determination. The storm had passed, leaving destruction in its wake, yet the spirit of the town remained. She glanced at the stranger who had become her unexpected companion. He was awake, sitting quietly by the window, gazing at the town as if he could see both the present and what it might become. "Good morning," Maria said softly, trying to sound cheerful despite the weight of the previous day. The stranger looked up and nodded, a calm smile touching his lips. His presence was reassuring, steady, and for the first time in days, Maria felt a flicker of hope for the future. He moved with deliberate ease, his every action measured and thoughtful, yet filled with quiet strength. It was clear that he was ready to help, not just her, but anyone in need. They set about the day's work together. The first task was clearing the street in front of Maria's house. Trees had been uprooted, fences had collapsed, and pieces of roofs lay scattered across the mud. Maria had begun moving smaller debris alone, but with the stranger's help, progress became almost effortless. He lifted heavy wooden beams and moved large pieces of metal as if they weighed no more than paper. His calm efficiency was astonishing, yet he never rushed or seemed impatient. Every movement was precise and deliberate, showing a combination of skill and care that Maria had never seen before. As they worked, neighbors began to emerge from their damaged homes. Some were elderly, others were families with small children, all looking weary, frightened, and unsure of what to do next. When they saw the stranger helping Maria, a murmur ran through the small crowd. They watched in awe as he coordinated the clearing of debris, offering gentle guidance to those who needed it. His words were simple but effective, each instruction given with clarity, kindness, and authority that inspired confidence. Maria noticed how the stranger seemed to anticipate problems before they happened. When a weakened branch threatened to fall on a neighbor, he moved instinctively to block it. When a crate of supplies teetered precariously, he steadied it before it could tip. He even spotted a small child stuck under a fallen fence before anyone else noticed, calmly lifting the obstacle and freeing the frightened boy. The townspeople looked on in astonishment, some whispering to each other that he was no ordinary man. By midday, Maria and the stranger had cleared much of the street in front of her home, and the town began to feel a little less chaotic. They worked side by side with the neighbors, distributing food and water, helping people salvage what they could from their damaged homes, and checking for anyone who might still be trapped. The stranger's presence was calming, almost magnetic. People who had been terrified moments ago now worked together, guided by his quiet authority. Maria felt a deep admiration for him, realizing that his extraordinary abilities were not just physical, they were also emotional and spiritual. During a brief break, Maria sat on a broken bench, wiping sweat from her brow. The stranger joined her, sitting a respectful distance away. "You are doing a remarkable thing," she said quietly. "I don't know what this town would have done without you." He shook his head slightly, his eyes thoughtful. "It is not I who is remarkable," he replied softly. "It is the courage and care of people like you. I am simply here to help." Maria felt a warmth in her chest. He spoke humbly, yet his actions had already proven that he was capable of extraordinary things. The afternoon brought new challenges. A small fire had started near one of the destroyed homes, likely from a fallen lantern or a spark from broken electrical wiring. Panic began to ripple through the crowd, and Maria felt her stomach twist in fear. But the stranger moved quickly and decisively. He gathered water from nearby buckets and, with the help of others, managed to contain the flames before they could spread further. Every action he took was calm, precise, and fearless. Maria watched in awe as he led others to safety, his presence transforming panic into cooperation. As the fire died down, he turned to Maria. "There is more to do," he said, his voice steady but encouraging. Maria nodded, feeling renewed energy from his confidence. Together, they went from house to house, checking on neighbors, helping with minor injuries, and offering support. When an elderly woman cried at the loss of her roof, the stranger comforted her gently, speaking words that seemed to ease her heart. People began to gather around him, drawn by his kindness, his wisdom, and the quiet strength that radiated from him. By evening, much of the town had been organized. Supplies were distributed, minor injuries treated, and people began to rebuild their homes, guided by the stranger's advice. Maria sat for a moment on her porch, exhausted but inspired. She realized that the stranger's presence had transformed the town in just a day. Where fear and despair had dominated, hope and cooperation now flourished. And yet, despite all he had done, he never sought recognition. He worked tirelessly, quietly, as if driven by something deeper than praise or gratitude. As night fell, the townspeople gathered in small groups, sharing stories of the day's events. Many spoke in hushed tones about the stranger who had appeared from nowhere, saved lives, and guided them through the chaos. Some wondered who he really was, how he had survived the storm, and how he could do the things he did. Maria listened, her heart full of admiration and wonder. She knew the answer in her own way. He was extraordinary, and his presence had given them something far more valuable than physical help. He had given them courage, hope, and the belief that even in the darkest times, goodness and strength could prevail. Later that night, Maria and the stranger sat together inside her home. The work of the day had taken its toll, yet he showed no signs of fatigue. He helped her prepare a small meal, speaking in calm, measured tones about the importance of rest, care, and perseverance. Maria marveled at his endurance, realizing that his strength was not just physical, it was emotional, mental, and almost spiritual. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for what he had done, but for the way he had reminded her of the power of human kindness. After eating, they sat quietly, watching the stars appear in the clear night sky. The town lay still, recovering from the storm, but Maria felt a profound sense of peace. She realized that this stranger, though wounded and unknown, had changed her life. He had shown her that courage and compassion could exist even in the most difficult circumstances. And she understood, in a way she could not fully explain, that his arrival had not been by chance. As they prepared for sleep, Maria reflected on the day. The stranger had revealed an extraordinary aspect of humanity, the ability to act with calm, courage, and wisdom even in the face of chaos. His presence had inspired others, including herself, to rise above fear and despair. She knew that the town would continue to face challenges, but she felt confident that, with him there, they could face anything. Before closing her eyes, Maria whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. She did not fully understand the stranger's past or the source of his strength, but she knew that his actions were a gift. And in that quiet moment, she realized that sometimes, extraordinary people appear in our lives not to be noticed, but to guide, inspire, and remind us of the courage we all carry within. The night passed peacefully, a calm after the storm and a testament to the power of kindness, resilience, and quiet strength. And as the first light of dawn touched the town, Maria knew that the days ahead would be filled with rebuilding, hope, and the continued presence of the man who was no ordinary person, whose quiet courage had touched the hearts of all who had witnessed it. The days following the storm began to settle into a rhythm, though the town was far from restored. Maria awoke early, as she had since the morning after the tornado, and glanced around her modest home. The sun cast a warm glow over the broken streets, illuminating both destruction and the small signs of recovery. People were beginning to work together, clearing debris, salvaging what remained of their homes, and sharing food and supplies. But the most remarkable presence was still there, the stranger who had changed everything with his quiet strength. Maria moved quietly through the kitchen, preparing a simple breakfast. She heard him stirring in the next room and smiled softly. Though he had been injured, he had regained most of his strength, moving with an ease and confidence that never ceased to amaze her. The man was no ordinary stranger. His calm focus, his patience, and the care with which he treated everyone around him made him feel almost larger than life. Yet, he remained humble, never boasting, never drawing attention to himself beyond the help he offered. After breakfast, they walked through the town together. Maria pointed out homes that had been damaged most severely and those where people still needed assistance. The stranger listened carefully, then offered gentle guidance. He helped lift heavy beams from rooftops, advised on safe ways to clear rubble, and even helped fortify weakened walls with simple techniques that kept them from collapsing. People began to follow his advice without question, and even those who had been fearful found courage in his presence. By midday, the town was starting to feel less like a place of destruction and more like a place of hope. Maria could see neighbors smiling, talking, and working together in ways they hadn't since the storm began. Children who had hidden in fear were now running through the streets, their laughter bright and healing. It was a sight Maria had longed to see, and she realized how much the stranger had influenced this transformation. He hadn't just helped physically, he had inspired people to believe in themselves, to find courage they didn't know they had. During a brief pause in the work, Maria asked him quietly, "How do you know what to do? How can you stay so calm when everything is falling apart?" He looked at her, his expression serene. "Because fear does not solve problems," he said simply. "When we focus on what we can do rather than what terrifies us, we discover strength we never imagined. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it." Maria felt a shiver run down her spine. His words were simple, yet they carried wisdom beyond her understanding. The stranger continued to help throughout the afternoon. He tended to the wounded with care, showing Maria how to properly clean and bandage injuries. He guided people to safety in collapsed buildings and lifted heavy objects that would have taken several men to move. His actions were precise, yet he moved with a grace that seemed effortless. Maria realized that the town had been lucky not just to have him survive the storm, but to have him present afterward. He was saving lives in ways that went beyond physical strength. He was restoring hope and courage where despair had threatened to take hold. By evening, the work had slowed. The streets were clearer, the injured were attended to, and people were beginning to rebuild their homes. Maria and the stranger returned to her small home, both exhausted yet quietly satisfied. They shared a simple meal, eating in companionable silence. Maria found herself reflecting on the past few days, on how this stranger had appeared out of nowhere and transformed everything. She couldn't explain how he had survived the storm, why he had come to her town, or what force had brought them together, but she knew that he was extraordinary in ways that could not be measured. As night fell, Maria lit a small lamp and they sat together, looking out at the town under a sky full of stars. The broken streets and damaged homes were still visible, but so was the determination of the people to rebuild. Maria felt a deep gratitude toward the stranger, not just for his help, but for the hope he had inspired in everyone around her. She realized that courage and kindness could spread like wildfire, and that one person, no matter how quiet or humble, could make a difference in countless lives. Suddenly, the stranger turned to her. "Maria," he said softly, "I must continue my journey." Maria's heart skipped a beat. She had sensed that he was different, that his presence was a gift, but she had not expected him to leave so soon. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Why can't you stay?" He smiled gently, his eyes calm and unwavering. "Because my path lies elsewhere. I appear where I am needed most, then move on. My work is not to stay, but to help others discover their own strength." Maria felt a lump in her throat. She had grown to depend on him, to admire him, to trust in his guidance. But deep down, she understood. He had come into her life at exactly the right moment, when fear and despair threatened to overwhelm the town. He had shown courage, strength, and wisdom, and now it was time for others to continue the work he had begun. She nodded slowly, though her heart ached. "Thank you," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "For everything." He reached out and touched her hand briefly, a gesture full of warmth and understanding. "You are stronger than you realize, Maria. Do not forget that. You and your neighbors have the courage to rebuild, to care for each other, and to continue forward. That is the true gift." Before she could speak, he stood, gathering what little belongings he had. Maria noticed the quiet dignity in his movements, the calm focus in his eyes, and the strength that seemed to radiate from him. He did not rush, did not demand attention. He simply moved with purpose, ready to continue his journey. Maria felt a mixture of sadness and awe. She had been blessed to meet him, to see what one person could do when courage, kindness, and determination combined. He stepped outside into the cool night air. Maria followed him to the edge of her small yard. The streets were quiet, the town finally at rest, and the stars above seemed to shine brighter than ever. The stranger turned to her one last time. "Remember, Maria," he said, "the extraordinary is not always in what we do alone, but in how we inspire others to act with courage and kindness. You have the heart to make a difference." Maria watched him walk away, his figure slowly disappearing into the night. She felt a deep sense of loss, but also an understanding that his presence had left an indelible mark on her life and the town. She returned to her home, her mind full of thoughts and her heart full of determination. The stranger had shown her that even in the darkest times, courage, kindness, and hope could shine brighter than fear. In the days that followed, the town continued to recover. Neighbors worked together, inspired by the example set by the stranger. Maria led efforts to help those who had lost their homes, distributing food and supplies, and offering comfort where it was needed most. Children laughed and played again in the streets, and the townspeople spoke often of the mysterious man who had appeared when they needed him most. Maria never forgot him. She would tell stories of his bravery, his calm strength, and the quiet wisdom that had guided the town through disaster. And though he never returned, she felt his influence in every act of courage, every helping hand, and every moment of hope that flourished in the town. Years later, when storms came again or hardships struck, Maria remembered the stranger and the lessons he had left behind. That courage was not the absence of fear, that kindness could inspire change, and that extraordinary people often appeared quietly, at exactly the right moment to show what was possible when we choose to act with our hearts. She would often sit by her garden, looking at the sunrise, and remember the morning she had pulled him from the wreckage. She smiled, knowing that the world had given her a gift, a reminder that even in ordinary lives, extraordinary moments could appear, moments that could transform hearts, communities, and the future itself. And in that quiet reflection, Maria understood that her life had changed forever, not because of the storm, but because of the man she had rescued, and who had, in turn, rescued her town and her spirit.